Good to go.
Okay. So I'll call this to order. I call this February 16, 2023 Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc Committee to order. I move that to approve the minutes from the meeting of the Safety and Wellness Ad Hoc Committee dated. Oh, Barb, do you have the minutes?
No, I don't, Maya. I'm sorry. I didn't get them done in time. I'm sorry.
No
I'll
worries.
do them for the Board of Ed. Thank you.
I appreciate all the work that you're doing for us and with us. So Barb, you're a rock star. Okay. We can move into the final recommendations. Barb sent out an email this week, just kind of with updated information. We have all the recommendations in board docs, as well as the previous grid, and also some of the thoughts and things that have come up during this committee. So we can go ahead and look at the final recommendations to the Board of Education. And we can move to the next section was student mental health.
Maya, do you want to visit the stuff that was done from last week, or just go right into student mental health?
I would prefer to go ahead straight into student mental health because
Okay.
our conversations are a little lengthy.
Yep.
And folks can go into board docs or read or watch our previous meeting, or go into board docs. You should have access to what was done previously. So essentially we went over some of the other categories, but I just want to move straight in, and then I'm actually going to allow Lavinia to head this one. So Lavinia, if you want to chair this part of the student wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can just get started with student mental health, like Maya said. And then Barb, do you want to screen share it if you can?
Yes, I will. Also want to give you an opportunity, Lavinia, to share those student statements that you just gave. So whenever that's
Yeah,
appropriate.
absolutely. I think we can do that after.
Sounds good. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I won't read them all or anything. I think we can just get started into what are the top 3 recommendations, or like top 3 proposals that people had. So does anyone want to start us off? Okay. Why don't we hear from Megan or Cece? Can you guys just talk about your top 3 proposals you had, and we can get started on discussing that.
Yeah, I can go.
Thanks.
My top 3 were I, V, V, and I, specifically 2 and 6, because I feel like there's not a lot of resources available for students, or there are and they're just not known or like talked about enough. Whether that be like a need for staff and student services, or just like resources being like made available and like known so that students have like that access to them. I just really feel like student mental health should be really prioritized, and I think these categories represent them.
And then Cece, can you repeat your top 3 again?
It was I, V, V, and I, 2 and 6.
Okay. Megan, would you like to go?
Yeah, so my top 3 are 1, 5, and 2. Just because I think that like a partnership with UW Health would be great, just because I know that their therapeutic services, and just like mental health services in general, can be really helpful, and They're pretty straightforward access wise, like even without a partnership. In terms of number one, like right now, I feel like a lot of students are either really unaware of the services that are available to them or don't have access to a counselor or a psychologist or a social worker, or don't have a relationship with them just because the school is so understaffed. And so it's probably like number one takes like the most priority for me out of all of them, just because like so many students that I've talked to have really been trying to get a hold of any type of mental health service, even through the school, and they just have been unable to get it. And it's been really detrimental to their work as a student. It's been really detrimental to them as a person. And there have been times where I've been seriously concerned for them. So I think improving access to services throughout or like through the school would be really, really beneficial.
Thank you, Megan and Cece. Mari, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, I think there are two different documents in play, and like I think Cece just referred to Megan, I think just referred to a document different than the previous comment. So we should maybe confirm which because the numbering is different and people need to confirm which document they're going from.
Yeah, Mari, I think Megan was just referring to the Roman numerals when she listed the numbers. So, and Megan, feel free to clarify, but I believe she was
is that
looking
right?
at the same doc.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm going off of the final recommendations to the school board that Barb shared. Is that the correct one?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just said the numbers instead of the Roman numerals. I apologize.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's my bad.
Ruben, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that makes sense. I just wondered if anybody who had written the comments for Roman numeral, I think number 3 and Roman numeral number 7. I was just curious why those were priorities. So I'm trying to find offer a student 25% credit for school committees and then utilize flex periods. I know I've heard about flex periods, but I just wanted to elevate that as well because I've heard about that student teacher planning time. So those are the two that stood out to me, but I just didn't know if anybody who had written them had any comments about them, but I agree with what's already been said.
Yeah, does anybody want to speak out about either 3 or 7?
Which is the committee time or the flex time, which I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Megan, go ahead.
I have a clarifying question about number 3. What is the technical definition that we're going by for school committees? Is that like student council, a student senate, or just like any club? What is kind of like, is that all encompassing?
Yeah, I am not sure who wrote that recommendation, so I don't know exactly what they mean.
I wrote that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just, there's a, elevating student voice on committees. This is a lot of work. I remember doing this when I was in, high school and college committees. So this is, reading a lot of documents, doing your research. And I just thought, if students are really going to be vested in, providing student voice, that there should be at least an opportunity for some social studies credit or something towards their participation. So I'm not talking, that's a very good question. Where do you draw the line, right? So is student council, is that just an assumed kind of responsibility? well, not an assume, but a responsibility that a student would take on, and, you know, you'd put that on your resume or whatever, your student application. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where you would draw the line. Committees that are technically advisory committees, or I don't know, just something to think about.
Thanks for the clarification, Rebecca. Ms. Hotz?
Yeah, I think we'd have to be really careful about what that is, because we have a lot of people on commit, you know, like student council itself is not necessarily that time consuming, and, you know, choosing ideas for prom is not the same as one of these advising committees. I like the word advisory committee. I think that gets to maybe the heart of what was intended here, because those are ones that, you know, have more of the research thing. They're usually outside of class time, things along those lines. But I think we have to be careful with that. And I would shy away from putting any, I would not be for putting any discipline credit associated with it. It needs to be just credit, not, you know, because then we get into a whole other mess.
Thank you, Ms. Hotz. So if that's something that we as a committee want to move forward to the board, we can definitely reword it to be more specific and say advisory committees. But yeah, Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna just mention maybe language around just board approved advisory committees, because then that would be more specific to like some of the student senate and, you know, like the panel that will be happening and such. So I think that kind of adds a little more I guess is the, but no, I agree. I think getting credit, I just remember as being a student, and I was a part of a lot of clubs, of a lot of like advisory committees, a lot of things. And I necessarily didn't get credit, but I did a lot of outside work. And I know, like, you know, like you all that are on this committee, you've given up a lot of your time to be a part of this and ensure that students are heard. So I would say that I'm down with actually like getting credit for you all, but then also too, I agree with Jessica about just making sure that, you know, that it's not specific per se, just because I know that there are some certain requirements that like students must have a certain amount of like math, a certain amount of hours of social studies and those kind of things. So we don't want to get down that road, but I think definitely getting you guys some credit somewhere is great. And it will encourage students to participate more, I think. So.
Thank you, Maya. Ruben, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to comment twice. I'm just bringing this up because what I'm hearing is from the group is that student voice piece is the really important part. So I'm trying to figure out if there's other pieces from this list that we're interested in. That was what I was interested in. And maybe, I don't know, Rebecca, if you have any numbers that you're basing that 25% off of, or if you want to do a suggestion to the panel to say, look into how, like, because I assume your goal is students who take on the mental stress of doing these kind of administrative processes need this support academically, where we have this power to support them, right? And so maybe the panel could look into what kind of outcome for student academic achievement that actually equals to, because I don't want to put a random number on it. So that's why
No, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, and that starts to get into micromanagement, and I really don't want to
exactly.
get into micromanagement, you know.
So maybe my movement would be the panel looks into the mental stresses of extracurricular academic or administrative processes for students and figures out academic equal. Does that make sense to the committee? Or maybe our second suggestion.
Okay. So are you, oh,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I just have one thing to add, and I
Yeah.
want people to know that the students who serve on the Board of Education receive academic credit for their year-long service when they do that. But that was board action taken many years ago. So I know that that's what it took to do that. And if you want, something could be looked at for the advisory panel.
Thank you.
Yeah, Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still in the same vein of what Rebecca was mentioning. I do think it is valuable to have it like any kind of board approved advisory committees because and not just limited only to this panel that will be assembled, especially as the board and administration have definitely tried to have more student voice, for instance, like with the referendum in the buildings of the high schools, like they want to continue having students voice a part of that. So if we're gonna have like certain things that are like that, I would love to make sure that the students get the credit for it. I don't know how much credit is attributed, but I think if we do have like it could be like a semester based on quarters or semesters, which then makes sense if, like, for instance, those that serve on the Board of Education for the students, they get a credit for the year-long service. And maybe that's something that we look at to base off of like how long this service is going. So, but that's just neither here nor there.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. Ruben, really quick, I just wanted to, I don't know if you're still there, but I just wanted to clarify, do you want this to be something that the panel looks, or is this something that you want us to pass to the Board of Education, but also have the panel like research and make sure that we're giving the right amount of credit for the students? I think he might be away right now, so we will come back to him. Okay, Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of, in the vein of youth voice across a lot of sectors, some form of compensation for that time is something that is becoming standard, whether that's monetary compensation or I think in this respect, potentially credit. I think there's some comparables out there as well, especially around the quarter credit kind of scenarios that probably could be related, like the employment portions where quarter credits are given for, and don't quote me on these hours, but I think it's like 90 hours within that semester or that quarter, that there's an hour for hour or a certain number of hours that need to be documented in order to achieve that quarter credit. So there may be some comparables already out there that don't need to be researched as much, but I think compensation for time, whatever that is, and at whatever level, advisory committees, whatever, I think that's meeting with best practice kind of nationally around engaging youth voice and compensating youth for their voice.
Absolutely, Andre. Thank you. Yeah, I think we can keep our language pretty general with it, and do something along the lines of like, just like an appropriate amount of compensation, either in the form of credit or monetary, for board approved advisory committees. Cool. Is there any more comments on that? Ruben, go ahead.
Sorry, I had also asked about if anybody has any comments on Roman numeral 7, which I think is about the flex period. I don't know, is flex period, maybe I don't understand what that means. Is that student flex period or is that teacher flex period? I'm not sure what that is asking about.
Yeah,
I'm
so
trying to think of our top 3 suggestions from this.
yeah, so flex period is the last 20 minutes of 50-minute lunch period at the high schools. Not sure how it is at middle schools or elementary schools, but that's kind of like when students go to ask teacher questions and stuff after they have like their 30-minute lunch period. But I don't know if the person who wrote the recommendation wants to talk about that. They might also not be here. I know we're missing a few people. But if there's any comments on that. Yeah. Ms. Hotz.
I mean, I'm just a little unclear how that would work as far as who's doing these things. We have to be careful, in my opinion, not to add more to teachers' plates. If this is an additional thing to prep for, that could be a serious problem. But I totally support like having time worked into a schedule to make these things available. I think that's super important. I really love like the idea of this. I just want to make sure we don't get it so specific that it becomes tricky.
Yeah, we can definitely possibly consider changing the language for that. Mike.
Good evening. I'm sorry, my voice is a little shoddy. I think that might also connect with Roman numeral 2 in terms of working to ensure student services staff are able to spend 80% of their time on duties, just because of low staffing, a lot of staffs or a lot of student services have been spending their time either subbing or doing behavior support. So if like Jessica, I'm all for Roman numeral 7, but I think just kind of like mindful planning that if we're going to have student services, such as nurses, psychs, social workers, counselors, do offer social emotional learning and mental health supports, that they have the time to do it effectively. Because I think that's one of the things that I've heard from not only the practitioners, but also students, is that they don't have access really to their student services because they're either working with other students and are overwhelmed and there's not enough of them, or they're doing duties outside of their job.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Does anyone have any comments about Roman numeral 7 or 2, or possibly joining them together, switching up the language? Yeah, Ruben.
I don't have the language of this because I don't remember fully what the conversation about the first item was. So, but what we talked about in the first item, I think a modified version of, what was it? 3 and a modified version of 7 to reflect the comments that were just said by Ms. Hotz and Mr. Jones, I think is what I'm aiming for, but I'm sorry, I don't have language for it. But I just wanted to pose that for the group as the package that we put forward.
Yep, thank you, Ruben. Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, Mike and Jessica, like what you were referring to, just making sure that we have enough support staff, and possibly making sure, well, not possibly, but and making sure that the resources are done well for the students. I think combining them might work, but I guess for me, like, I'm just curious as to like how students currently use some of their flex periods, if they have them. And does it have to be necessarily as specific, or could it be just having the space and time to be able to do it, and then, figuring out what that might look like for each student? So, but I'm not exactly sure. Do you guys get to use the time right now to talk with like your psychologists or counselors or whatnot, if you do have them? Just a question to students.
Yeah, Cece, go ahead.
Okay. I know for me, Flex is mostly used for like working on assignments or like tests that you miss. But I know that going into student services or talking to counselors or psychologists is definitely an option for students. They're just harder to reach because of like the overwhelming amount of students that do go in there for help.
Unmuted. Thank you, Cece. Megan, do you have anything to add?
West doesn't really do flex time, I don't think. So I don't really have anything to add under that.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Hotz.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not sure it would be the best time to get the most kids access, because basically students at East are just at lunch the whole time. So even the students that might need it might not be willing to give up that chunk of their lunch that they do value to get those services that they do need. So I think either being really vague about it or setting aside a time when students wouldn't be distracted by going off and getting lunch would probably reach more students.
Yeah, we can change the language to just like talking in general, offer time during school for students to explore and learn more about various educational topics and visit their social workers and like student service staff. Could keep that pretty general. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Yeah, Megan.
Okay, so I just looked up the West schedule and it looks like our lunch is technically split up into two parts. One's 30 minutes and then the other one is 20 minutes. So there might be flex time built into that. But that being said, this was the first time I've ever really heard of flex time being a thing. And while I do see students going in and interacting with teachers, I legitimately didn't know this existed until just now.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. That's actually really interesting because at Memorial we have a bell after the lunch 30 minutes ends to signal or for the start of flex period, and you just see a bunch of people get up and go to not a bunch, but a decent amount of people that start packing up their lunch and go to see teachers that they need to talk to or need help with. But yeah, that's very interesting. And based on what I'm hearing about from Ms. Hotz and Megan, most students utilize both the lunch and flex period as just a lunch period, and it wouldn't be, I guess, very useful to have those services offered specifically during flex when there's just not that much of an incentive to take time out of your lunch period to go and learn about this stuff. But yeah, thank you for your input. Maya, go ahead.
I was just going to ask what the current numbers that we have so far. And I think going back to, I think what Ruben said earlier, if we wanted to, we could maybe kind of shift some language with adding, because I do think there is importance to allow, the staff to be able to use their time that aligns with what they need, but then also allow the students to have the space. And I think it's just finding a balance between the two. So whether that is something having student services maybe just assess something I've tried to merge them in my brain, but today has been a snow day in my brain, unfortunately. Something like having student services and assess a balance between ensuring that some of the school-based student services staff are able to use their time, but then also that students have the ability to find ways to utilize some of their flex or lunch for other mental health things. So kind of finding so that they kind of are the ones investigating what is that balance, and maybe working back with folks to figure out what that balance is. And then hopefully the panel can ensure that happens. But that's just a recommendation, I guess, if we want to keep those in there. I think they are important, but at the same time, I understand.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. Mike, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's important what Megan was saying regarding the flex time also, because that was when, because during lunch supervision, counselor, I know counselors and psychs, or I know psychs and social workers. I'm not sure if counselors they were on the radio and they were doing lunch supervision. They were part of the lunch supervision kind of coverage team, because I was on it too. So I think like we also gotta just be mindful that if we're going to make that a thing, that that impacts lunch supervision and a whole lot of other things in buildings.
Thank you, Mike. Gordon, go ahead.
So the whole purpose of this flex time is to just get educational mental health support. Right.
Oh, wait, are you asking?
Yes.
Yeah, based on the recommendation, yeah.
And how long would these flex times be?
Yeah, so it would be around 20 minutes.
Okay.
every-
And how frequently would it occur?
Like flex period or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, I mean, it's technically every day. But like it depends on the student how they like utilize their time. They actually use it as a flex period or as a lunch period. Or
Okay.
extended lunch period.
Oh, I see. I don't know about this because it's like, their staff members are already overworked. There's shortages, behaviors, it's not improving as much. The lunch times are, in my opinion, long enough, and there are a lot of clubs who also have dedicated times to do things. So I wonder if we could just probably like more towards like for mental health support, just making sure like students are able like know of the resources available to them to get that. It just promoting that more. And for the educational support, maybe counselors can lead like workshops every so often within a quarter dedicated to that, and then assistant principals can like help get input on certain school issues or work through student councils or something. But I think with the flex, but I just think with these flex times, it just make things a lot more complicated. And I just don't want to put too much pressure on our staff members, especially during this time.
Yeah, Gordon, thank you. And that's something to consider if we feel like, I guess like rewording Roman numeral 7 isn't really, I guess, worth the time in that like the main issue might be addressed somewhere else. And like the main kind of point based on it seems to be to just like offer these like supports for students. But I feel like we can also like not, this is sorry, we can just focus on the other ones and kind of make sure that we are being general and kind of prioritize just like offering students mental health support and like time to like talk with student services or like anybody else. And I feel like that might be addressed in some of the other recommendations. That was a very long, twisted way to say that we might, that we can also consider not kind of pushing this towards the Board of Education if we feel like the stuff that we're trying to get at already is encompassed in the other recommendations. But yeah, well, I think we can, should we, Maya, should we like reword number 3? Because I feel like there was lots of support for Roman numeral number 3. And we could like kind of make sure that we aren't forgetting about what we've already discussed and get that language worked and out of the way.
Yeah, so I think I'm hearing that we have number 3 was 1. Number 4 was 1. Number 5, and then 2 and 6 of number 1.
Okay, can you clarify, are you saying Roman numeral 1 or?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. So of no numero okay. Of Roman numeral 1, there was 2 and 6. And then the discussion went to Roman numeral 3 as well, and then Roman numeral 4, and then Roman numeral 5. And yeah, those were the ones that were stated before we had the discussion about Sorry, I keep wanting to speak Spanish. It's not work. Okay. Roman numeral 7. And
I think there was also Roman numeral 2 mentioned.
okay. I think 2 and 7 were the ones were
Yeah.
together.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think you can, if we want to, we can just go ahead and do the individually. So we can
Mhm.
say like with the provided language, we can change some of them. So yeah, I would say if you want to do Roman numeral 3, we can just be more general, offer students credit for work that they do on board approved advisory committees, I think was kind of the language that we came up with.
Yep. Should I? Okay, this might not go that
Try
well. I'll try.
Go ahead, do it.
Okay. Do I just start with it is proposed that the safety and student it is proposed that the safety and student wellness ad hoc committee recommend to the Board of Education Roman numeral 3 regarding I guess offering the appropriate amount of credit for the work that students do on board approved advisory committees. That good. Okay. Did I do it? Was that a motion?
Yes, you
That's
did.
second.
Thank you. Oh, and then all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and then all those that oppose, raise your hand. Okay. Any discussion?
Discussion goes before the vote. So we already voted.
Oh, whoops. My bad.
We had the discussion, so it's fine.
Okay, good. Okay, so all the voting members, I believe, voted yes. Cool. Is that it?
Yep, and none opposed.
Okay, yeah, and none opposed. Okay, we got number 3 out of the way. So, Maya, if we want to do the 2 and 7 wording now, or is that something that we wanted? Yeah.
When I look at these kind of broad statements, when I look at Roman numeral 1 and under it number 2 and number 3 and number 6 and number 7 and number Roman numeral 5 are all around improved communication with students, staff, and families regarding mental health services and supports. And so can we find a way to just craft a statement that incorporates improved communication services around mental health services and supports for students, staff, and families, that incorporates student voice?
Yeah, Rebecca. And I know that Roman numeral 5 kind of talks about partnering with UW Public Health program to kind of create like a comprehensive mental health communication plan. Is that something that you'd want to keep like general and not completely mention?
Again, it just feels like it gets into micromanagement that, I don't know, is that affordable? Is that doable? Do we have a communication division in our school that that should be their focus, so that, I don't know, I don't want to get into this micromanagement. Those might be, like, for example, if this panel that we're saying we're giving these recommendations to for implementation, maybe they can say, oh, there was this recommendation maybe for contracting with UW Public Health. I know there's public health students who are required to put public health like a campaign together. Sometimes it's around cancer knowledge or smoking or whatever. Sometimes that's a requirement for their graduation, and we could use them. I don't know. Again, I don't want to micromanage, but the issue is communication, improved communication around resources that are available in the schools, resources that are available in the community, how to access those resources both in the schools and the community, and communicating that with parents, students, and staff.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that there is value in condensing them, as Rebecca mentioned, but I also think that there is value in being very specific, with I'm gonna keep saying numero uno. Sorry, Roman numeral Roman numeral one. I think it's super important to ensure that there are some specifics around that. Now, classroom teacher.
Which one?
Roman numeral 1. I think where it gets for me is just being a little specific on ensuring that at the beginning of every semester that all 3 levels ensure better communication. Maybe that's kind of similar to your language, but I do think being specific about the timing of it. Now, where I kind of am like, well, like, how much do we want to put on classroom teachers to ensure that they are the ones doing it? Or is that something that we can say, like, the schools will do it, like the principals or student services, or like, like, where does that work lie? But I do think having very specific every semester, it's addressed. We just heard a student basically say, like, I didn't even know something existed until I just read it just now, And so I think if we can find a way to be very specific, I think it's great. But I do hear you on the micromanage of like whose work that lies in, I think is up to the administration, but I think recommending that we have it specific. I also think I heard one of the students say that they actually pulled Roman numeral 5 specifically because of the component working with UW Public Health. I mean, I think we can recommend that to the board. I know that UW is already like a really big partner of MMSD, but I am down to try to get partners to have a greater stake in the work that we do. And so I'm okay with calling them out specifically and saying, hey, and if we want to go further, we can be like, Dane County Mental Health, how can you jump in? If we want to go even more specific. I do think there is some value in being specific some spaces, especially around the type of partnerships we want to have with folks. So, but I do hear you. I do think there could be some condensed language, but I'd also, some of these, I don't want to lose the essence of them either. So that's kind of just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Maya. Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, I disagree with what Maya was saying. I do see value in condensing some of these. However, I think the way it's laid out now, it just like it won't be too much for the board to comprehend all at once. Like they can go step by step of what individual things you would like to see. And I do think that it's just for the Roman numeral 5. I wonder if you could just change the language to say, your public health, or like might say Dane County, their mental health office, or just like something that just that's like some kind of like public health program or anything of that sort. But that's only if we feel like that's necessary. But other than that, I just think it's the way it's laid out is fine as is. For anything, I just think it gets more clarity to like what specifically we want to see at various areas.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess a couple quick things, and I guess how my mind thinks is I would deal with the Roman numeral and then move to the next one when you're dealing with two at the same time. I think you kind of cross over and confuse things, but I guess starting with Roman numeral 5 and piggybacking on some things Gordon said, I think making it more general, like maybe, exploring partnerships with public, health agencies, to develop communications plans. That leaves that open for, that you're exploring, you're not committed to partnering, and it also keeps it more broad as to would that be UW, would that be Madison Public Health Dane, or Dane, whatever the way they call that. The second thing, going back to structurally to Roman numeral 1, as you have sub bullets in here, the way my mind thinks is that these are subcategories within the larger piece. And so I guess I want to clarify, is that correct or not? Because, I think you could then, if that's the case, have the broader statement at the beginning that at the beginning of every semester, and then give examples like we did in one of the other ones that hit on some of those 1 through 8, whichever we selected, as examples of what that first thing is. So for them, to me, to be subcategoried under, that means they're relating back to the initial portion, or else they're a standalone by themselves, and then that would
I would
pulled
agree
out.
with you, Andre, but they're not related.
Right.
So I don't know why they're listed as subcategories, because if you look at the general statement, Roman numeral 1, that really is about communication around mental health supports. But then I guess you could say number 1 could be an element around, as I mentioned, so that as a component of improved communication around mental health supports, make sure that we are including student voice in those communication processes. However, when you look at number 4, it's really about services, having services available. They're not really subcategories to the general. So I'm not sure why they're listed as bullets underneath, because they don't seamlessly flow into Roman numeral 1, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca and Andre. I think when I guess formatting Roman numeral 1, even though it may not be kind of in that format right now where that sub bullet points directly or like right, like our specifics for the general statement, we can format our proposal to the Board of Education like that, in that format. So that's something that we can discuss. But really quick, I wanted to quickly go back to number 5, Roman numeral number 5, and see if I just like don't want to lose track of what the progress we've made on Roman numeral 5. I know I wanted to see if there's any discussion on that and see if we want to keep it or propose it to the Board of Education as a separate thing rather than combining it with number 1. Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think keeping it its own one, I'm down with that. Although I do see like the value of like condensing some of the information, and it maybe I kind of liked what Andre was saying about if we wanted to keep it more general, we could, but also still mention. I mean, I don't like the terminology exploring. It gives it too much of a, well, we can, or maybe do it, like we'll explore it, but it doesn't necessarily give a definitive that we should do it. But I do think saying something around like partner with public health agencies, including UW-Madison Public or UW Public Health and programs and others such like it, to create a comprehensive mental health communication plan, like, or just not even just a communication plan, just like a health plan for students, staff, and families. So I think that finding some way to incorporate others in there, but also still being very specific is kind of how I see it. But having it on its own, I think it's good. And I think we can figure out how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Does everybody agree with kind of like the proposed wording that's been going around by Andre and Maya? That we keep it general and say like public health agencies? Or, okay. Mental, oh, I lost it. Okay, for mental health plan. Okay. Okay, I think we can do the wording now, if everybody's good. Okay. Give me a sec. Okay. It is, let me make sure I have this. Okay.
You don't have to get that, you don't have to get that technical about that. The intro language is always going to be the same. It's recommended
Okay,
that
okay, okay.
the committee recommend to the board, so you don't have to bother with that. Just go
Okay.
right to the wording of the item that you're on. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was just making sure I had the wording correct for this. Okay.
Thank you for that.
It is proposed by the Safety and Wellness Ad Hoc Committee, recommend to the Board of Education Roman numeral 5, which states that we should partner with public health agencies such as UW Public Health programs or some other programs such like that to create a mental health plan for students and staff. Then is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hands. Okay, and then all those that oppose. Okay, motion passes. All the voting members said yes, and there were no nays. Okay, so we have 3 and 5 Roman numerals done right now. I think now we can move to the wording of number 1. Members mentioned keeping or formatting it in a way that there's a general statement that's general, and then have subpoints that get into a little more of the specifics. So is there any, and then people I think mentioned including number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, and possibly rewording that to make them into one statement. But yeah, does anybody have any thoughts on Roman numeral 1 and which sub bullet points to include? Oh, Andre, go ahead.
So without getting into all the others, I would propose eliminating 6 if we just passed 5. That seems to be creating a comprehensive, communications plan with public health. This one seems to be saying the same thing, but with a communications firm. So I would propose eliminating that from consideration.
Okay. Does everybody else agree with that? Yeah, I think it would get don't want to repeat ourselves, but Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. So I wrote down what Rebecca had mentioned just about the improved communications for mental health supports and resources for students, staff, and families, and that students ensure that student voice is a part of the process. I think we can also just ensure because I don't want to lose the first part of it, at the beginning of every semester at all 3 school levels, that those communications are happening. As far as the individual ones, I don't have a preference per se, but I was just gonna give you that language again that Rebecca mentioned I had wrote down.
Yeah, definitely. I have that down too. And then we can include that as would we include that as included in the general statement or as a sub point?
I think it could be included in the general statement.
Okay.
And maybe it's in the improved communications, that statement. And then ensuring at the beginning of every semester that those supports are communicated or something like that.
Okay. Okay, so we're kind of switching around. Andre, go ahead.
I think also, Roman numeral number 1 question. I'm getting your thing. Number 2 of that, I think we'd have to educate the teachers before you can assume that they are providing the piece. So maybe that language, at the beginning of every semester, educate teachers on what's available for students, and then ensure that every classroom teacher, if that's truly where that should be taking place. So I also have a question of whether you should eliminate teachers from that and list that more generally, ensure that students are made aware, and leave that more general versus it being every classroom teacher. but you might say like educate staff on what is available for students, and then ensure that students are made aware by staff or whatever, that language would be. But I think you have to educate them on what's available before you can expect them to educate other people, whoever those people are that are doing the educating of that to the students.
Yeah, definitely, Andre. We don't want to kind of push this work onto teachers when we know that they already have so much and so little time to kind of plan and do, put together their own material. So we can keep it pretty general and just have it be staff. Yeah, Ms. Hotz.
I would just agree. And I think sometimes it would be great for classroom teachers to do it, particularly the refreshers. But like if there's a big kind of like school-wide thing about procedural stuff at the beginning of the year, it could go there and not have to be in the classroom teachers that time, but then the reminder. Yeah. So I mean, and I think the point about staff being educated and being clear, and really it should be all staff. That I think is the crux of it, and that really has to come from the top.
Yep, definitely. Thank you, Ms. Hotz. Okay, does anyone have thoughts to add? Okay, I have a question for the committee. Do we want to keep it specific and say behavioral health support? Or do we want to keep it even more general and leave it open to other forms of support? Yeah, Maya.
I would keep it more general.
Okay, just like support.
Like mental health and mental health supports or in resources.
Behavioral health is kind of becoming the new buzzword versus mental health, just as an FYI. So that probably is more aligned with the terminology now than mental health services. You're going to hear much more of behavioral health services because that's the kind of trend in that area.
Rebecca, what do you think about the mental health versus the behavioral health language? You're muted.
I think behavioral health is a little bit more comprehensive. And Andre's correct that really is the terminology that is used currently. And I think at the beginning, I recommended that, we say something like improved communication around behavioral health. I might have said mental health, supports and resources, both in the school and in the community. And then I think I mentioned, making sure that those improved communications around resources, behavioral health resources in the schools and in the communities is for staff, students, and families. I don't know exactly what I said earlier, but something to that effect.
So the improved communication for behavioral health, and I stand corrected, so thank you for correcting me, both of you.
How about this improved communication around behavioral health resources available in school and community? And then, I don't know, you either put that for staff, students, and families, either at the beginning or somewhere, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, improved communication with staff, students, and families around available behavioral health resources, both in schools and the community.
Okay.
And then I think that kind of captures like Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and Roman numeral 5 in some capacity.
Yeah. Ruben, go ahead.
I completely agree with that. I just want to know, is the time when families learn about those resources right now mostly around when an incident happens? Or is there some sort of schedule when that happens? I just don't even know what the reality is now to say improved, right?
Well, Ruben, I'm on the mental health team in the school district. So we have a page where we try to let parents access where if they wanted to find mental health resources in the community. There's a behavioral health, the Dane County Behavioral Health Resource Center. There's Alice. There's information around groups that are run in the school district. So there's it doesn't just happen, fortunately, when there's an incident. We're really have made great efforts to have mental health or behavioral health information available to families so that they can access it as well.
No, I definitely appreciate that. And then thanks for that context. I just meant, so do you mean more active pushing out of those resources when you say improved? I'm just trying to get at what you're, or do you mean more robust partnerships? I'm just trying to figure out what you mean at improved.
Well, I think some of those what I've heard over the course of this committee is that there's the community and the committee is saying, oh, we didn't know those resources were available.
I see.
So it's both and.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you. So yeah, I completely agree. I just want to make sure we were clear on what we're saying. Noting that communication is very hard for every institution working in it.
Okay, thank you for the clarifications. Maya, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say it, just doing a time check at 6:25.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. I think we can wrap up 1 soon, 3 and 5. And then we can look at the remaining proposals and see if we want to submit those. Okay, so for Roman numeral 1, we'll see how this works. But there's a general, right now, the wording I have is improved communication from staff around behavioral health supports and resources in schools and in the community for students, staff, and families as the general statement. And then we also mentioned making sure that it includes student voice and making sure that it happens, that communication happens at least at the beginning of every semester at all the 3 grade levels. Is that good? Okay. Okay. So do I leave my question? Do I leave this as just one big one, or do I have the make sure to include student voice in and making sure that this communication goes out every semester at all the 3 grade levels? Do I have those as sub bullet points, or can I just include it in the statement?
Just include it in the statement, and if we want to, we can go through individual, like number 2, 3, like some of the ones that folks said, and we can just ask consensus if folks want to vote on it or not. But I would just say, I think that is a pretty good statement that you said. So, and you won't have to repeat it again. You can just say what you mentioned.
Okay. But really quick, do we want to keep it general with the student voice and just say include student voice, or do we want to be a little bit more specific on like exactly where the student voice would be implemented?
I think that's a question for you and the students, honestly.
Yeah. Cece and Megan, you guys want to hop in?
I think it could definitely be added as something more general.
Megan?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like we've talked about like I feel like elevating student voice is also elsewhere within the other, I think it's like 7 or 8 recommendations within mental health, even if it's like insinuated. So I think that like having it be general here would be fine.
Okay, sounds good. Ms. Hotz, were you gonna say something?
I think the point that it's elsewhere is fine, but like, I just
Mhm.
was gonna say in general, I think when voice gets brought up, I'm cynical about people saying, oh, we give it to people, but you're right. I mean, we have it more specifically elsewhere, so I think we're good.
Yeah, that's kind of why I brought it up, because I was like, yes, we have like this wording saying we should include student voice like in so many places, but how exactly does that happen is not very consistent and regular. But yeah, we definitely, it's true that we have that wording elsewhere, so we can keep it pretty general. Okay. So do I just ask for a second, or do I have to state that I said the motion?
You can just say that you propose the following language that you just gave earlier, something like that.
Okay.
I think it should be fine with Barb in capturing that. Barb,
I can try that. Can I try it? Okay, I'll read it back to you, Lavinia.
Yeah.
Okay. Improve communication from staff around behavioral health supports and resources in schools and in the community for students, staff, and families, making sure it includes student voice and making sure it happens at least at the beginning of every semester at all 3 grade levels.
Yes. Okay.
And you can ask her.
Yeah. Okay. Can I get a second?
I'll second Maya. Or Megan, I think you muted. Megan, go ahead. You can second it.
I didn't hear that, but okay, Megan seconds.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Oh, yes. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hands. Who? All those that oppose? And Gordon, I'm assuming your hand is raised for her. Okay. Okay, motion passes. All voting members. Oh, that Dr. Hicks, are you raising your hand in support?
Yes.
Okay. all the voting members, what? Okay, all voting members voted yes, and there was no oppositions. Okay, moving on. So we have moved forward Roman numeral 1, 3, and 5, and we have 2, 4, 6, and 7 left. And does anybody want to? Oh, Maya, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was just gonna say, I think we already kind of made one to number 4, or Roman numeral 4. So I don't think that necessarily we need to say anything about that. And I think we kind of all had the consensus that number 7, Roman numeral 7, wasn't necessary per se, just based off of the conversation.
Okay. If everyone is agreed with that, that leaves Roman numeral 6 and 2. We did
Roman numeral what?
6. And we discussed 2, but I think there was more discussion on 7, that 7 wasn't necessarily required. So is there more discussion on Roman numeral 2 or 6? And
I would move to just eliminate Roman numeral 6 And the reason why I'm saying that is if you look at Roman numeral 2, that focuses on allowing the psychologists, the social workers, the counselors, and the nurses to do the jobs that they're supposed to be doing at the level that they should be doing it, that SELs, social emotional learning, is better incorporated into the curriculums of all levels, K through 12.
Really quick, Rebecca, are you proposing to add that section onto number 2 and eliminate 6, or did I misunderstand that?
No, I'm just no, I'm not really saying that. I'm just saying that Roman numeral 2 allows those individuals to do the work that they're there for, which includes social emotional learning. Which is in most cases social emotional learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure I didn't mishear you. Okay, is there kind of a general committee consensus to get rid of number 6? Okay, and then discussion on number 2, we want to move that forward. Is there any kind of language that we want to change? I do have a quick question. Is like 80%, like, is that being too specific? And can we say something along the lines of what Rebecca said, that they're supposed to, or like, be able to do their duties at the level they're supposed to do it at? Or is 80% like fine? I'm just like kind of, I guess, a little hesitant about saying 80%.
I would defer to Michael Johnson. Like, well, do you think that's is 80% a good reflection of the time that these individuals should be focused on their specific duties that are really their core competencies and their fundamental practices?
Normally, I would try to shy away from like a blanket, like quantitative measure. But that being said, I think we need to have that discussion in terms of, because it's been taken away so much, especially in the last couple of years because of short staffing. So I think when I have spoken with student services staffers, just at all 3 levels, I think that's what they would like is like 80%, because there's also a balance of, if you are short staffed, they don't mind, chipping in here or there with subbing, with coverage, lunch duties, those sort of things, behavior response, but they can't, a lot of the things where students' needs aren't being met and then it blows up, and then there's regret afterwards. So I would say, as imperfect as a metric as 80% is, I think it needs to be hammered out so that we can actually have some protections around it, so that because there are times where principals are protecting, student services and doing that, but because it's not spelled out, then they get pressure to put them on the behavior response protocol or to do other jobs. And it needs to be explicit for all parties so that people know this, the counselor is going to be focusing on counseling. The social worker is going to be focused on social work. And it doesn't leave any vagueness, I guess, no matter which building you're in. So that was a fancy way of saying, yes, this would be good.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mike. Any other comments about number 2?
I would just like to add something about what Mike just stated around the number of time or the number of a specific like 80%, 20%. I think that in most ideal cases, it is 80-20 or something like that. And while we are in a specific time of things, I think we also need to be flexible in our like communication instead of just putting like, oh, it's this, because again, while there are some people who are to the letter of the law or to the letter of the number, there are also other people who are flexible, right? And I think that a lot of that communication though comes out from around what the needs are. The needs look differently in different spaces. And we also have to be cognizant of the fact and the reality is that a lot, while we are trying to keep at the national paces for, having people in these positions to do these jobs, right? To perform these functions with the young people, they aren't there. And so I just not the way and the rate in which they need to be. And so that we wouldn't even mean having to have these conversations. But I think sometimes when we put while we think it's helping the whole system to say, well, they're going to be doing this and this, it ends up, hurting the system. So I just want to put that in the space. Not that it will change or not, but I just want to say to do something one way and not, you got to think about the whole thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hicks, about that. Ms. Hotz.
I respect that the practicalities get in the way, but I think this is aspirational. And I think we have to go for the full, for as much as we can get, and just say this is what should be happening, even though, whatever. We know there are realities, but I don't think we should stop at any less than what we think should be the case. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Hotz. Mike.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Hicks is 100% correct. And I think we can, as we're talking about, like, the subsequent wellness panel that hopefully comes out of this work, it could be something that we can look at, right? Or whomever's on the panel can look at and say, okay, are we at 80%? Are student services tracking 80%? If it's 50%, why is that? Not that it's hey, we're going to begin pointing blame at the principals or whomever, because the realities are going to be that. But I think it does help with like maybe a root cause analysis of, okay, there's not enough staff in this building. Why is that? Is the principal, like maybe the principal's getting staff in there, but maybe they're being held up for whatever reason. Maybe there's, there might be all sorts of reasons, but I think this helps us maybe look at it in kind of like a more holistic and humane way that we can ask those questions instead of jumping to conclusions one way or the other and say, hey, this is, looking at the binary black and white, like this either isn't happening or it's 100% happening, and probably the reality is somewhere in between. And just as Jessica said, we aspire to do that because we can then ask, is this helping our kids? Is this helping our scholars the best way possible?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Okay. So for number 2, there's kind of both sides that we should keep it, that possibly should not be getting into the specifics. And there's also the side that we need to like move towards kind of going back to normal amount of kind of work from staff at that 80%. So I've been hearing both sides, so I want to make sure that the committee agrees on one.
Lavinia, you can propose a motion with it in, and then see what you get.
Okay, sounds good. It's proposed that the Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc Committee recommend to the Board of Education the fall Roman numeral 2, which states that we need to work to ensure that school-based student services staff such as psychologists, social workers, counselors, and nurses are able to spend approximately 80% of their time on duties aligned with MMSD's core competencies and foundational practices. Can I get a second? Okay, Mike seconds. Any discussion?
Since I brought it up, I said I'm gonna just add commentary on this, that while it's aspirational, if whoever is in the process, kind of be reflective of like the realities. I do think that we should all be doing all of our jobs to 80% of what we are supposed to be doing. And that's aspirational. I just don't want people to like say when they need to do something or what is something you can't, because people are holding on to this, well, I have to do this, and just so I would vote for it as long as that it would be like discussion in the process of the recommendation and the board discussion.
Yeah, Dr. Hicks, thank you for that comment. And I'm assuming that that's something that the panel can kind of follow up on as it's being implemented. But yeah, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, all those that oppose. Okay, motion passes. All voting members voted yes, and there were no nays. Okay, guys, we have student mental health done. We did Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and 5. And then there's obviously word changes, but yeah, wow, finished one. Yay. And obviously it is well, it is 6:46. So Maya, would you like to take away our last one?
Yes, so I will take it away on training. I will try to be as fast as possible so that we can get done tonight and we have everything done. Okay, so going into training, we'll do it similar. I think we can ask folks if they want to quickly pull a few that they really feel strongly about. And then if there are none, then we'll just go individually, each one. And we'll go from there. How does that sound? Good? Okay, so I open it up to folks who want to pull from the training category if there are proposals that they feel very strongly about. Don't all raise your hand at once. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Roman numeral 9.
Okay. Are there any others, Mike, or that was the only one?
Sorry. So I think also 7.
Okay.
And 8.
Okay. Got it. So I see 7, 8, and 9. Were you gonna say something else?
No.
Megan, I see your hand. Go ahead.
3 and 9.
Okay. Ruben, I see you came on the top of my screen, but I don't know if that's because you had your hand raised when I was looking down. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I was just, I noticed that number 1 and number 2, and maybe a couple others were about drills and frequency of drills. And so I know that Gordon especially was talking about the number of drills. So Gordon, I don't know if you're still here, if you want to talk about the importance of those, or if anybody else feels like those are still important, or if anything's changed, or, and also number 1 says specifically continue with your increased number of drills. I don't know if there's some sort of science behind how many drills you have and how prepared people are. So I don't want to just say increase, but I'd want to know, like, get to a certain point. That was my question. Or any other students.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Megan, are you going to respond to that, or do you have another one? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the number of drills are, I mean, to me, like, continuing the number of increased drills, like, that's important. And like, while I know that we talked about some of like the more active shooter type drills can be triggering to students, like, we're kind of living in a day and age where it is important, and with construction and the new classrooms, things like fire drills and exit plans are constantly changing. And unfortunately, I've been in situations where, like, our teachers didn't know what the new best, like, exit plan was, just because, like, of the construction, or of stairways being blocked off, or hallways being blocked off. And it's put us in some not super safe situations, unfortunately. So while it really should not be the teacher's job to defend their students, and it's horrific that we live in a day and age where that is kind of the expectation, I think it's important that students also need to be aware of what the plan is, and I think a good way to have that is through the continuation of those drills.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add that, like, I would rather like be extremely familiar with the drills, even if it kind of creates uncomfortable situations where, like, it's kind of like triggering for some students, than be in a situation where I have no idea where I'm supposed to go and peers around me have no idea what we're supposed to do. But yeah, I just wanted to add that.
So I guess what I'm hearing from that is the goal is really systematizing and making a regular schedule around the updates around what the safety procedures are, so that when they change, everybody knows what they are. Or is that what I'm hearing from the students who just spoke? Okay, thank you.
So Ruben, I hear, based off of the conversation that we just had about possibly condensing those into one, about just systematizing and creating a regular schedule or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing, is systematizing and creating a regular schedule around updates to safety planning for students and staff as they update. Because it sounds like there's no normal schedule around when they update, which I completely understand. If things change, you're not going to wait to update them, but people want to know. So
Okay. So I guess we'll start with this one, 1 and 2, as we go through, unless others have other comments. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just gonna say for 1 and 2, you know, a lot of times before the pandemic, there was kind of like a joint safety group with operations and MTI, where we did hammer out some of these things, and some of it was, and then it was kind of communicated to the principals, and then it was dispersed from there. I think we kind of lost maybe Dr. Hicks has a different perspective or would disagree with me, but felt like we lost a little bit of that with the pandemic because we were just so focused on just like surviving the day to day and just making sure everyone was taken care of on that. So the drills kind of fell to the wayside when you're just trying to deal with COVID. So I think I just wanted to lift that up as a reason why that might be happening. But I think now is a perfect opportunity to bring this back or to reemphasize it, just because also, a lot of the high schools at least have been, with all the construction and the renovations, there's just going to be new ways and staff need to be trained on that. And, I went back to West High School and I got lost, and that's a school I used to be a dean of because of all the new construction. So like, I think this is a good way to emphasize, okay, let's make sure this is a focus as we head into welcome back and getting ready.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I agree. And I mean, I'm appreciative that, like, I know our financial secretary is sending us updated, this is where these rooms should evacuate to. There's really no reason that students couldn't get that kind of information too. So, because there are people working on it.
And I think item number 12 is an element of that, Ms. Haas, providing all lessons via newsletter or safety website for students and families to review what will be taught to students and staff. So I don't know if we want to just consolidate that or strike that. So 12, either consolidate it or
Add it to it.
incorporate it in some manner.
Okay. Yeah, Lavinia, can you go through the queue of people really quick? I have to jump rope.
Yeah, no problem. Ruben, go ahead.
Yeah, I also just hearing what Ms. Hott said, with sharing the information with the students, I think my tune tonight is giving it to the panel to find the best way to do that, because students may also, if they know the drill, who's that information getting to if it's just going through an email. So I think there's probably some best practice around that. So I don't want to set down a mandate, but I think our spirit is to share it with more students, staff, and faculty as often as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruben. Thank you. Ms. Hotz?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ruben just said, because I do think there probably is some best practice. There might be reasons why some of this stuff shouldn't be entirely public, just for safety concerns. So if we talk to the safety folks and get the best way to do that without, causing additional problems.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Hotz. Andre?
Yeah, I apologize if I didn't hear if we were talking about 1 and 2 in there. I think 3 actually kind of captures a portion of that and some of what they were saying, and maybe adding in the advance notice, but it speaks to the evacuation process, detailed information, and stuff around the drill. So I wonder if tweaking part of 3 that could incorporate increased numbers of drills and advance notice might get at encapsulating, kind of those pieces.
I would say 1, Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and 5, and 12 are all around procedures and emergency procedures and communication around those emergency procedures and the frequency.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from the conversation, and thank you, Lavinia, for going through the queue for me. What I'm hearing for the conversation is that it sounds like 1, 2, 3 5, and 12
Mhm.
are all very similar in it, but still with their own nuances around emergency procedures. Would we like to just advance all of those together? And we can just have like just a very simple statement that, and then just say that we can advance those ones to the Board of Education. And I don't know if folks want to read through them really quick. So it's 1, 2, 3, 5, and 12. Okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and read the motion. It is proposed that the Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc Committee recommend to the Board of Education numeral 1, 2, 3, 5, and 12 as set forth in this document.
Second.
Thank you, Andre. And then any discussion around it? Okay, looks like no one had much discussion. Okay, so all those in favor of that motion? Okay, Gordon and Ruben. Are you, okay, Gordon's voting in favor. And then any opposed? Okay, it looks like majority, looks like, yeah, everyone voted except Ruben didn't, but that's fine. There are no opposed, Barb. Okay, so now we are done with 1, 2, 3, and 5, and 12. There's also mention of 7, 8, and 9. So let's go to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess we can have the discussion about this one here. I think, Mike, that was the one that you have pulled to discuss.
Yes, just I'm just reflecting on also, just the incidents that we've had to, our students and staff have had to deal with over the last few years regarding sexual assault, as well as the work that Dana had brought forward to the committee. I just want to make sure that part is honored, and we have established ways of educating all scholars and staff about our responsibilities regarding consent.
Yes, thank you for bringing that forth. I know that Dana, if folks aren't aware, Dana Pelabon is a member of the committee, or a liaison group to the committee. And she did extensive work around the consent for the school district as well. And she is executive director of Rape Crisis Center. Go ahead, Ruben.
Yeah, thank you. I'm all in support of this curriculum. I was under the impression that there was already curriculum. Is this another example of just standardizing across schools, or is there something that we actually need to create that's a new curriculum? Is that the ask? I don't know if this exists yet. And if no one knows, we can just make it a mandate.
So I might be speaking out of turn, and please, someone who actually works in, or, Jessica or Dr. Hicks, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are lessons connected to consent, but there's not like widespread, it's not like a whole base curriculum in a unit, in terms of having that be uniform across the district. There are pockets, but I could be, at least that's my understanding.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead, Dr. Hicks.
So I would say what Mike said is correct, but again, I'm sitting from a lens of like, what are you guys talking about? I did all of this stuff in my school. I did like, so it's kind of hard for me to be like, wait, yeah, this doesn't happen. And so, or I should say, scholars are saying it's not happening, and it more than likely probably isn't happening consistently. And so, while there isn't a specific like curriculum around consent, there is learning that is done around consent, you know, like date rape, all kinds of things. And we just need to get it more uniform and bring it back to the forefront so that it's consistent across pre-K, 12, actually.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Hicks. And I'm also noticing number 13 is also very similar to number 7 as well. Andre?
So it's more of a question of working outside the system. But we had one of our juvenile judges that was very interested in this around dating violence and some other pieces. And DPI has developed curriculums that were free and provided to school districts. There was a committee throughout the county that worked with actually the developers of that curriculum and modified that to be delivered in shorter sessions with specific groups. So I guess I would maybe a friendly amendment to develop either like if there's curriculum that exists, like more of incorporate or kind of make it consistent, across that. But there were, by age group, differing lesson plans, incorporations of, a variety of things that wasn't a curriculum that DPI had developed. And so I don't know if there's things that exist rather than always sometimes we develop, but there's things that are actually already there. So maybe it's incorporating or, doing some of those other pieces. So, if there's a good thing, let's use that.
Yeah, question for you, Andre. Just really quick, Jessica, before you go. How dated is that information? Do you know?
Oh, I'm sure it's dated.
Okay.
But what I would say is, but I don't know, they could have had another curriculum that was developed since that point. I think the point being, this was something when we met with the creators of it, and one of the ones had retired, there was some, PhD candidates and some others statewide that had created this curriculum. I think there was disappointment on their level that schools did not routinely incorporate that. I think that was an expectation when it was being developed, and I'm sure there's a variety of reasons, why, that may or may not have been incorporated. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that they have one now, but I'm sure there's ones that already exist rather than developing. Can you look at, maybe exploring, researching, and incorporating curriculums? And then I think, and this would be more for that next group of what all goes into that, because it means a lot of different things. Are we talking about legal consent? Are you talking, there's a variety of language pieces that mean very specific things in different systems. So consent is a confusing term at best, depending on what system or what angle you're operating from. Like your age dictates legally whether you can give consent or not, irregardless of whether you have affirmatively said you wanted to do whatever was going on. And so I think just making sure, those things are there. So if you're 12, it's very different than if you're 17 or 16 and really 17 technically, but what does that mean for the 15-year-old that dates a 18-year-old or a 17-year-old, and then what legally maybe the consequences of that is different in Dane County than it is in other parts of the state. Like we have typically about a 3-year from our district attorney age gap in that kind of scenario. So I think, yeah, going through all of that and just incorporating and utilizing what may be existing and out there.
Great, thank you for that, Andre. Jessica?
I entirely agree with Andre. And I think particularly, making it age appropriate, developmentally appropriate. I know one of our social workers was working with some of our disabled kids in ways that were, more appropriate to their levels as well. I think it also matters how often it gets done. I think we have to establish a culture that talks about this a lot. I know they try to throw it into things, but it happens like once a year. Kids are missed. They don't go to those assemblies, they skip. It just needs to be much more present. And yeah, there isn't a need to necessarily reinvent the wheel where things already exist. And we do have great supports in the community that will help us out in DPI potentially too.
Great, thank you for that, Jessica, to reiterate that. I know that this was a big point with the students, with some of the work. I know East High School spearheaded a lot of pushing forward a lot of the consent and wanting that. So I don't know if the students want to talk to these points at all, but I think it is valuable because I know that that was something that students really push. And Gordon, you were also part of, you were in high school at the time as well, so.
Yeah, I can jump in. I know that ever since the walkouts of last year and a lot of the events that took place last year, West really has put a lot more emphasis on consent and things like that. We have a lot more clubs that kind of work with topics like that. We have Allies of Consent, some other clubs like that. We also have Regent Pride, and some of the, which is where we have shorter classes, and then we have a period of time where we talk about racism in schools or microaggressions, and we focus on one topic for 45 minutes and we talk about it, we watch videos on it, we educate ourselves or get educated on topics like that. And we have had things like sexual violence or consent and things like that. So what I will say is while I still wish that there was more of a culture that didn't make those topics seem as taboo as they are today. Today, right now, we are leaps and bounds ahead of where we were last year. So we're making progress. It's just it's still a very taboo topic, and it's one that I do agree with Ms. Hotz. I really do wish it gets talked about more. But some teachers have had lesson plans that talk about it or work it into a curriculum of a book or something.
Gordon, I know you unmuted earlier. Did you have something to add?
I just had a question. So what is currently in place at the schools regarding consent culture and reporting and investigating sexual violence?
Yes. Okay.
So can you restate that? My computer kind of went out, so I had to turn off my camera to try to get it back on. Sorry, Gordon.
Yeah, no problem. I would just say what is currently in place at the schools in terms of implementing consent culture and what is being done around the work for investigating and reporting sexual violence. I just want an update on it from the previous school year, what has changed and improved.
Yeah, no, on the board side, we've been pushing, as always, just more of ensuring that it is a part, the consent is part of the way that we view safety and wellness at the schools. But I don't know if Dr. Hicks wants to speak specifically on that. And I do know that it does look different at every school. And I think that that was one of the things that Gordon, you had mentioned earlier last year, was like, how can we make this more standardized and make this? And I think that, and I wish Dana was here because she has been doing a lot of the work at the schools directly with students and families, and with staff as well. But I don't know, Dr. Hicks, if you want to speak to something, if you have something to add, or even Mike or Jessica, of just like if there are changes that you have been seeing and what implementations have been happening.
I would just say that scholars' ability to be more aware and have more direct conversations and identify who they can go to for things has been more transparent.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know that that was one of the things that people didn't even know. Like some of the students, like, I don't even know who to talk to if something does happen or what the reporting is. So that's good to hear. Jessica?
Honestly, I haven't seen that much this year. We've done, I mean, with Gordon's help, they developed these great posters and so forth. Some of them are still up, some of them aren't. They're telling us not to put posters up anymore right now in general. I don't know what the deal is with that. I don't feel it's being talked about enough. And I know even just the development of the posters, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gordon, just took way too long. Considering it wasn't that complicated a message to get out there, to get flyers out about Rape Crisis Center. So it just seems like we constantly get bogged down with this issue, which is really discouraging because it really makes it seem like the district doesn't care. And I know that's not the case, but I get frustrated with it on a regular basis.
Thank you for that. Lavinia and then Gordon.
Gordon, you can go ahead because probably has something to do with what Ms. Hart said.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say that, by now we just have hope, like there has been assemblies on these things. Cause I remember like last year we talked about, we would have I think it was twice a year at the very least, around consent kosher and the procedures for like reporting and investigating sexual violence. Because the posters were just like a very minimal step, right? The much larger step was actually adopting consent kosher. So I wonder, like, for this resolution, like, how can we make sure that this is like further emphasized with this?
I'll answer your question in a second, but I'm gonna give Lavinia the space.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that like it was mentioned, the kind of experiences are very different at each of the high schools. Because like based on what I've been hearing from, Gordon and Ms. Hotz at East and Megan at West, Memorial has a very different experience. And at least personally to me, I just don't feel like these topics are talked about at all. And I think consent came up like during my required 10th grade health class, but it was never mentioned after that in any of my classes really. So like it's just even if it is like already part of like processes and like schools, it just like doesn't play out the same way in the high schools, and it doesn't play out in an efficient way. So it definitely needs to improve. But yeah, just wanted to share a different perspective.
No, I thank you for that. I think responding to Gordon's comment, I think I won't speak for all board members, but I do know that a lot of us have definitely spoken up about what does consent culture look like in our district, and what is needed for us to continue that work and ensuring that actually happens. I think one thing that we can do with this is that we can, again, make it very specific to the ensuring that we find or identify. So I know that 12 says 13 says identify best practices for consent education. And I'll merge it with this number 7 so that when we actually do go to the Board of Education, Lavinia and I, we can really say like, this is something that was really important to students and everyone. And then I also think that it will just be important, the panel that gets chosen ensures that this is implemented. I think that that's the biggest thing, is like this panel that will be here after this committee is going, like that work is going to be super important on them. And I also think another way to ensure that this stuff happens is to ensure that the students that are still there and the staff like us to constantly like, hey, are we doing this? Is this a part of the schools? And kind of advocate on that front, because I think what ends up happening, there's so many things that get lost. But I think it is up to us individually to keep pushing on it. So thank you, Gordon, for pushing us again, even tonight, to be like, hey, so what has changed since I've been at school within the year? So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and try to merge these two. So identify, so research and, all right. Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and say, it is proposed that the Safety and Wellness Ad Hoc Committee recommend to the Board of Education to research and identify best practices for consent education that is consistent with social emotional learning and is developmentally appropriate. This consent curriculum should include with the social emotional in all schools at all levels, and recommend that it can be taught in K or 4K through 12, so all grades to all students, and then partner with community agencies to do their best in those services. And that's what I came up with. Andre, is that a second or just a comment?
Just a friendly maybe add-on, as I
Yeah.
heard Gordon mention, especially the minimally twice a year, that or would be implemented school-wide or whatever the language of that was.
Okay. Okay. I think that, yes, I yeah, absolutely accept that. I guess then any discussion about merging those two together in that way? Okay. Seeing some nods, no. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, it's actually unanimous. Any opposed? Because I just have to say that. None opposed. Okay, so those pass. Thank you all. And then what was left was 8 and 9 based off of being pulled. And I think, Mike, that was you. And then also, I think Megan also pulled number 9 as well.
So
So
Andre
that's
said
everything.
8 was part of what he just amended, correct?
No,
The partnership was going to have the best practice. Isn't that what we're talking about?
No, it was 13, which is identify best practices, and then number 7 to develop a curriculum based on consent. Those
I
two.
read too many Roman numerals. I
No, it's all right. Andre?
I was just going to say 2 things. I would be in support of number 9. And just a question of what the developmental design, the DD, is for the maybe school folks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I can speak on that because I believe I'm the one who wrote it, wrote this one in. So developmental designs is kind of the social emotional learning sort of framework by which all staff are trained in in terms of having kind of common language, ways of engaging students, building community, and as well as just in terms of general training, in terms of how you have discussions around, like especially de-escalation, because I think and this kind of goes hand in hand with NVCI, is there's a lot of with number 9 is there's a lot that needs to be done for training staff, especially newer staff or staff that have just been in the district in the last couple of years, about how we have discussions and engage with students in ways that don't escalate the situation accidentally, and certain behavior responders, special ed teachers, security, they're supposed to get training in it, but one of the things we pushed for, or MTI pushed for, when we advocated for the removal of SROs, was to expand that training in order to make sure that people are getting the proper training in terms of how to properly engage with students, with what are some de-escalation techniques, what are ways that we can make people feel safe or help those conversations feel safer in the building. I don't know that I tend to ramble, but that's the gist.
And you are absolutely correct in your gist of what developmental design does. And it really, again, we talk about social and emotional. If it looks at, the whole child, the academic parts, as well as the adolescent, developmental brain part, and focuses on language, building community. Yeah. And we do have some in district trainers too as well.
And we spent a lot of money already on training those who are already trained.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
And we do really need to continue that, because I keep saying, like, wait, we know this, let's bring it back, like let's reground ourselves, people, because yeah, and it was very impactful and effective.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you, Dr. Hicks and Mike. Andre, hopefully that answers your question. Ruben, I saw your hand up, but I don't know. You put it down. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't see any changes in those two. I'm in 100% agreement with both, like what Dr. Hicks and Mike said. But I guess open it up for any other discussion around that point, those 2 points of 8 and 9.
I move to accept Roman, now you got me too. Roman numeral 8 and Roman numeral 9 as is.
Okay. That has been proposed and I'll second that. Rebecca, thank you. I guess all those in favor for 8 and 9. Okay, it looks like it is unanimous. Any opposed though? Just so I can ask. Okay, none opposed to that. So that is actually all the ones that folks pulled. It looks like the only ones that are left was number 4, 5, 6, number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is left, 11, and that's it. But no one, go ahead.
I would propose to remove number 4, because I believe it's addressed in the student mental health regarding resources, community resources. So I don't know if we need to, I don't see that as a training item. So, and I believe it's addressed in student mental health.
Great, thank you. Yeah, these ones aren't ones that we voted on, so really we can kind of scrap them and just go move forward with the ones. But I just wanted to give folks an opportunity for those last ones if they wanted to pull those and kind of move those forward if they want to. But it looks like no one is. Or go ahead, Ruben.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. The ones that we put forward, the top three or whatever those top ones are the ones that are gonna be on the final list, correct?
Yeah, so the ones that we will go forward are, we combined 1, 2, 3, 5, and 12 as one item.
Mhm.
As is. And then we merged 13 and 7. And then we just put forth 8 and 9 as is as well. And so the remaining ones were just the ones that were left that weren't necessarily part of any of the discussions that we had tonight and or part of the recommendations. Okay. So go ahead, Jessica. Were you going to say something? Okay. So it looks like I don't see any folks wanting to bring those ones that we didn't mention up. So we'll leave those. And now we are done with training. Barb, I think that was all of the categories. I know we have the general proposed actions. Do I need to read those, or because I know we already kind of proposed all the other ones before?
The general ones at the end, right? And then Lavinia has a couple of things to add also.
Okay.
And then we're done.
Okay. I'll go ahead in the proposals, or do you want to go ahead and speak, Lavinia, to?
You can go ahead with the proposals.
Okay. So it is proposed that all the recommendations provided by the administration to help inform this ad hoc committee committee be implemented as set forth by the administration. Barb, is that a typo by the administration?
No.
Okay.
I'm talking about the recommendations that were made by the administration in the grid a long time ago that we pulled over with all of this.
Okay, got it. It is proposed that all the recommendations provided by the administration to help inform this ad hoc committee to be implemented as set forth in the documents and attached in board docs. Andre, is that a second?
No, it's more of it seems like we went through a process that eliminated that piece. Like we could have just adopted everything that came forward, and we chose not to. We chose to go individually and create our own recommendation. So to me, that doesn't seem like that's something that you'd put forward now, because it's not what we did. We went through a process of factoring in what they said, but making our own recommendations.
Yeah.
Very well.
So I propose eliminating that one.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I mean, the only thing that, well, the recommendation advanced by it. Okay. Yeah, so the number B would be kind of based off of like our assumptions and what we've done, or not assumptions, but our work that we've done. It is proposed that all the recommendations advanced by the Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc to the Board of Education continue to be followed up on and monitored for implementation by the Superintendent Safety and Wellness Advisory Panel.
Second.
Andre seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Wait, sorry, discussion, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Ruben.
I just wanted to offer a friendly amendment that the panel consider accountability measures for how these are implemented. So I know that they're hiring the new superintendent and they have the power to build this into budgeting or whatever. And so I don't know the best process. And I wanted to turn over to Mike Jones to talk more about any of his thoughts about any accountability measures and how we should maybe build it into the final recommendation for this school board. Sorry,
thanks.
that meeting.
No, thanks, Ruben. I'll try to keep it brief. I think this group over the last year has been really effective in terms of whittling down and really analyzing what is working, what isn't working, what needs to be done. I think a lot of the power comes from the fact that it's shared leadership, led by students, led by board members, led by administrators, led by teachers, led by community members, and parents. And when we all come together, we can, get really good outcomes. So, because I think some of this also has to involve decentering teacher or, just teacher voice as well, and really looking at okay, this panel looks pretty representative based off of the iteration. What can we do? Can this be the group that's looking over the data, looking over the 80% piece, looking over other parts that we've been discussing over the week, over the months, and really say, okay, is the district doing what they should be doing? Where's the problems? Is the problem with one factor or the other? And that way it just kind of keeps the discussion going, as opposed to this being another committee where good ideas are created and then they die in another committee. So could we bring this and make sure that this is also a tool that the board could use as a framework, as we're talking about safety, because safety issues, even if all these things are adopted and we move forward and we progress, it's not like safety ever goes away. It's something we always work on. So I think this is a good framework in terms of moving forward, especially with potential change in leadership moving forward, and regardless of who's in those positions, we kind of know. And I think that's part of why it helps also with stability in terms of staff, students, families, knowing, okay, this is the way that we can kind of follow up and follow through. You know, if we're having concerns or if we're seeing things.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, Ruben mentioned just considering accountability measures.
So,
And
I
Mike,
guess I would move as a friendly amendment to have the panel consider accountability measures for the superintendent and or the school board for implementing these recommendations.
yeah. So what I have in my mind is it is proposed that all the recommendations advanced by the Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc Committee to the Board of Education continue to be followed up on and monitored, or continue to be followed up on with, my brain just stopped. Continue to be followed up on and consider accountability measures to ensure the implementation by the Superintendent Safety and Wellness Advisory Panel. Does that sound good?
I guess I meant by the superintendent and by the school board is accountability measure. I don't know. I mean, I guess, yeah, by the panel. That's what I meant. Yes, they'll look at what you were saying. Sorry.
Can you be more specific about what do you mean by accountability measures? I don't
So
understand.
in my thinking, I don't think this panel, this group is set completely to understand what those accountability measures would be, right? So I don't know what checks and balances there are for the check-ins for superintendent or for school board members. But I think that this panel might have a better idea of what measures could exist. And so I want them to look into, is there in hiring superintendent, do you ask them how they're going to implement these safety measures? In renewing their contract, do you ask them this? In school board voting panels, you ask them these questions. So just how do you implement it and how do you make people accountable to it is my thought. I don't know if anybody else had any thoughts.
Thank you. Dr. Hicks and then Andre.
So I just have a question when you say that, Ruben, and then this is also to you, Maya. Isn't this like what we just did? These are recommendations, right? That have to go back to the board and be voted on or whatever. And some of it may be voted on and some of it may not. So if you say accountability measures on what are the outcomes of those voters, something like that, because to me, it seemed like I don't want people to think that this is going forward, or maybe it is, I don't know, and everything's going to be voted on and everything's going to be implemented. So I just want to make sure, and I'm asking for clarification. These are just recommendations that we are doing forward, and then the board will then vote and discuss and all these recommendations. Yes or no?
Yes, so that is the proposed. So we are proposing these recommendations to the Board of Education. It will be at the regular board meeting, so we will discuss it. Sometimes, and honestly, sometimes things come to us in multiple items, and I have to check, and I'll check with Barb, but sometimes they come to us in multiple items and we just vote on them, right? As set forth based off of what the committee or ad hoc, recommended, right? And then sometimes we might say like, well, we want to do this one and this one and this one. And then we kind of set the tone of exactly what the administration needs to focus on based of us voting on that. If we do push it forward as is, I would think then the administration and the panel would have to discuss then what those accountability measures might be. Because I do think that I don't think it's our charge as an ad hoc to actually set up that. That would be the charge between the panel and the superintendent and the Board of Education rep, who is part of that as well, right? Who will be kind of like the liaison between the board and that panel. And I think, I'm pretty secure to be okay with that as far as like a board member and giving that power to that panel. I think what Mike mentioned before of just like ensuring that it doesn't get lost in the work that we're all doing, I think is going to be the most important piece to ensure that those things actually do get implemented, whatever that might be from the board. I can only speak for myself. I can't unfortunately speak for my colleagues, but I feel like we all have done a very great job. I think that we have interrogated a lot of this. We collected all the data from the community, and we gave it the work and attention that it requires, right? And so for me, I'm very down with all of the recommendations that we've worked through. But again, I can't speak for my colleagues, so I can't say that all of these will be going forward or none of these will be going forward or just a couple. Like I'm not sure how my colleagues will vote on it. But yes, Dr. Hicks, long story short, these are recommendations that will come to us as a body, and then we will vote on them however that might manifest. And then the charge would then be with the panel and the superintendent administration to make sure that they actually happen. But I think it's, again, on our front as a board to remind ourselves like these do exist, right? Whatever we do vote on, and kind of like also in ask questions and inquire about them as, as things are going as well. So hopefully that answers your question. And Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you got it. Part of mine. So part of mine was maybe slightly semantics on accountability, and usually those that can hold accountable have the power to do so, which I'm not sure this advisory group actually does. From at least my understanding, they're advising the superintendent, who's part of the executive portion that has the power to implement. I think it's great to put measures and have some statement around, holding to account. Maybe accountability usually also comes with the power to enforce whatever was or was not there. And I'm not sure that this group actually has that power structurally. At least from the advisory groups I've been a part of, and within the county structure, they wouldn't. They could advise typically someone in the executive that then has the power to enforce or not, based first on what was adopted or not by the county or by the school board as of those recommendations going forward. So I think having measures and reviewing those and holding people to account for whatever those things were that were adopted is good, but I don't know that they have the ability to actually the power within this structure to hold those accountable to do the recommendations that we're putting forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. I do like the language of the considering accountability measures, because I also think that allows that panel and is whoever is, this work will start with Dr. Jenkins, although, he is retiring. We definitely want to try to get this in place as soon as possible, obviously. But whoever is going to be the superintendent thereafter, I think that considering accountability measures, that's a work between the panel and the superintendent. at the time to determine like what are those shared accountability measures, right? Like, even though we might be advising you, what can we say like to put in place together? Because again, going back to what I think, Mike, you had said, this is definitely a shared leadership between all of the stakeholders that are part of that, including the superintendent and the panel. So yes, I think considering them, I think is a good language without necessarily putting specific accountability measures, if that makes sense. So I accept your friendly amendment, Ruben. And I think, Andre, you seconded it. So I think you also technically have to accept it.
Yes, I accept it as well.
Okay, awesome. And then any other discussion on that point? Okay, all those in favor again, raise your hand. Oh, Rebecca, go ahead. You're muted.
Can you just restate it, please?
Oh, sure. It is proposed that all the recommendations advanced by the Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc Committee to the Board of Education consider accountability measures and continue to follow up on the implementation by the Superintendent Safety and Wellness Advisory Panel. Okay. So then all those in favor, raise your hand. Hey, Ruben. Are you in? I guess all those opposed. Okay, it looks like unanimous for, none opposed. And then I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Lavinia just to give an update.
Yeah, so Barb, if you are able to, can you pull up the student
one moment.
statement?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So we just have we have statements from the students on the committee, just like their feelings about the panel as well as the committee's work. And I kind of met with all the students to talk about like their thoughts and everything. And there's like general agreement that they kind of hope that our recommendations that were proposed by this committee improve our general safety and wellness kind of environment at school, and also just like specifics about like hoping specific parts of our recommendation get implemented in schools. But yeah, and then thoughts on the panel, a lot of it was just like making sure that, like it was mentioned earlier, that the work that has been done in this committee doesn't just end here, that it continues with the panel, and that we don't forget the work that we've been working on as the panel starts. But yeah, that's kind of it. There's like specifics if you want to read is in board docs, but that was kind of general statements. And if Cece, I don't know, Megan or Gordon wants to say anything. I know it's like really late, so I want to keep this brief, but I also want to give opportunity for them to speak. Okay, cool. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Okay. And then the last thing is kind of just updates. Oh, sorry, Ruben, go ahead.
Well, this might be the time since I don't want to take any more time after the end of the meeting, but I just wanted to commend all the students for making their time on this committee. This was a really huge commitment on top of all the stuff we're going through. Obviously, all the community partners, thank you so much for being here. Everybody who couldn't be here tonight and who's been here. The school folks, you're obviously going through it. That's why we're in this meeting in the first place, so thanks for taking the time. And I also want to give a special out to Gordon, who was here tonight earlier and graduated and came back for these meetings, and I know what it was like to be in that space. So, oh, there you are, Gordon. I didn't recognize you. You look so much older and cooler now in college. So I know what that's like. So commending all of you and thanks so much for working with us. And I'm really proud of what we got to go through and the voices we got to bring forward in this committee. So pointing it out because you mentioned that list, but it was a lot of people that went into this, a lot of time and work.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruben. I agree with everything you said, and thank you so much for the kind words. Really quick before we end our final meeting, there's been some updates that I feel like would be nice for the committee to know. We did submit recommendations in the nutrition category, and in Governor Evers' budget plan, there has been kind of advancements in the food nutrition category, kind of working that proposed to work with Healthy Meals and the Healthy Kids program, and kind of include around a budget or like invest around $120 million in the 2024 to 2025 school year, to reduce hunger and fund school breakfasts, lunches for children. And lunches for children. So, and also, I think part of it was to kind of work with Wisconsin farmers, food producers, and local economies. But yeah, I just wanted to update you guys on that if you had not heard of it yet. But yeah, so good news. Well, it still has to be accepted. Legislature. It is in the budget, so progress. But yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Lavinia, and thank you to the students again for working with Lavinia and getting your voices about like what you hope for this community or for this committee and the work thereafter. I think it is, as Ruben mentioned, super important that your guys' voices are centered, but at the same time that this committee and the work that we've done doesn't go forgotten. And I really do appreciate everybody who has been a part of that, including the community who gave us all those 600 pages of recommendations or feelings and hopes and dreams and such for us to work from. Our next steps are that Lavinia and I will report back to the Board of Education at the Operations Work Group meeting on March 13th, 2023. All public input will be shared with the Board of Education as well. You guys are welcome to come to that meeting. And if you want to come to that meeting, just let us know in advance if you want to speak, just because then we can also have you there to speak to some of the work that you've also done as well. It is a hybrid option. So if you want to do, Zoom, like definitely just register and let us know. And then, yeah, again, thank you all for the work. I know we're like almost done. So I am down for our last meeting, a motion to adjourn. Can I get a second? Okay. Ruben is seconding, Andrea is seconding, Dr. Hicks is seconding, everyone's seconding. All those in favor of adjourning? It is a unanimous. Thank you all so much for all the hard work that you all put into this.
Thank you, everybody.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you everyone. We were able to accomplish so much, and I'm so proud of what this committee has done.
Have a good night.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
everybody.
night.
Maya, can I go to the operations meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I just talk to Barbara about that or?
Just hold on just a second.
Okay.